The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty training ground as Sarah Mitchell adjusted her helmet strap for the 100th time. At 22 years old, she stood barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, but her presence commanded attention among the other soldiers. Her brown eyes held a determination that had been forged through years of proving herself in a world where many believed she didn't belong. Sarah had joined the military 3 years earlier, driven by a family tradition that stretched back generations. Her grandfather had served in World War II, her father in Vietnam, and her brother was currently deployed overseas. When she announced her intention to enlist, her family's reaction was mixed. Her mother worried about the dangers, while her father questioned whether she had the physical strength required for combat roles. The recruitment process had been brutal. Sarah faced skepticism from instructors who doubted her abilities and fellow recruits who saw her as a liability. During basic training, she was often assigned the heaviest equipment to carry, given the most challenging obstacles to overcome, and scrutinized more harshly than her male counterparts. But Sarah never complained. Instead, she used every challenge as fuel to push herself harder. Her first assignment was to Fort Henderson, a remote military base located in the mountainous region near the border. The base housed approximately 3,000 personnel and served as a training facility for specialized combat operations. The terrain was unforgiving, with steep cliffs, dense forests, and unpredictable weather patterns that could change from sunshine to blizzard within hours. Commander James Reynolds had been leading the base for 2 years when Sarah arrived. At 45, he was a decorated veteran with over 20 years of military service. His reputation was built on fairness, strategic thinking, and an unwavering commitment to his soldiers' welfare. However, Reynolds initially harbored doubts about having female soldiers in combat roles, viewing them as potential weak links in his carefully coordinated operations. Sarah was assigned to Alpha Company, 3rd Platoon, under the direct supervision of Sergeant Mike Torres. Torres was known for his tough training methods and high expectations. He believed that soldiers were only as strong as their weakest member, and he was determined to ensure that every person under his command could perform under extreme pressure. The first few months were incredibly challenging for Sarah. She struggled with some of the physical demands, particularly during long-distance marches carrying full gear. Her fellow soldiers were polite but distant, uncertain about how to interact with her. Some worried that having a woman in their unit would compromise their effectiveness, while others simply didn't know how to behave around her in the traditionally male environment. Sarah's breakthrough came during a particularly difficult training exercise designed to test soldiers' endurance and problem-solving abilities under stress. The exercise involved a 48-hour survival simulation in the wilderness, where teams had to navigate treacherous terrain while completing various tactical objectives. Each team consisted of 5 members, and Sarah was the only woman in her group. The exercise began before dawn on a cold October morning. Sarah's team was dropped deep in the forest with minimal supplies and a series of coordinates they needed to reach within the time limit. The weather was harsh, with freezing rain that made every surface slippery and dangerous. Visibility was poor, and the team had to rely on their training and instincts to navigate the challenging landscape. As they moved through the forest, Sarah noticed things that her teammates missed. She spotted animal tracks that indicated safe paths through the wilderness, identified edible plants that could supplement their meager rations, and detected subtle changes in the terrain that helped them avoid dangerous areas. Her attention to detail and survival instincts impressed her teammates, who began to view her as a valuable asset rather than a burden. On the second day of the exercise, disaster struck. While crossing a rocky stream swollen by the recent rains, one of Sarah's teammates slipped and fell into the rushing water. The current was stronger than expected, and the soldier was quickly swept downstream toward a dangerous section filled with sharp rocks and fallen trees. Without hesitation, Sarah dove into the freezing water. The shock of the cold took her breath away, but she forced herself to swim toward her struggling teammate. The current was powerful, and she had to fight against it while trying to reach the drowning soldier. Her training kicked in as she used techniques learned in water rescue courses, approaching from downstream to avoid being pulled under herself. She managed to grab her teammate just as he was about to be swept into the most dangerous section of the stream. Using all her strength, she pulled him toward the shore, while the rest of the team threw ropes and branches to help. It took nearly 15 minutes of exhausting effort, but eventually, They managed to get both soldiers safely to the riverbank. The rescued soldier was hypothermic and had suffered several cuts from the rocks, but he was alive. Sarah immediately began administering first aid, while the team leader called for emergency evacuation. Her quick thinking and medical training helped stabilize the injured soldier until help arrived. Word of Sarah's heroic actions spread quickly throughout the base. Commander Reynolds personally commended her for her bravery and leadership under pressure. More importantly, her teammates' attitudes toward her changed completely. They had witnessed firsthand that she was willing to risk her life to save others, and they began to respect her as an equal member of their unit. The incident marked a turning point in Sarah's military career. She had proven that courage and determination were more important than physical size or gender. Her fellow soldiers began seeking her input on tactical decisions and including her in their informal leadership discussions. Sergeant Torres recommended her for advanced training programs, recognizing her potential for greater responsibilities. As winter approached, Sarah settled into her role at Fort Henderson with newfound confidence. She had earned her place among the soldiers through actions rather than words, and she was determined to continue proving herself worthy of their trust. However, she had no idea that the most challenging test of her career was still to come, and that her actions would soon make her a legend in military history. The base continued its routine training operations as the weather grew colder and more unpredictable. Sarah threw herself into her duties with increased enthusiasm, participating in advanced tactical exercises and specialized training programs. She was developing into one of the most reliable soldiers in her unit, known for her sharp instincts, unwavering dedication, and ability to remain calm under pressure. Winter arrived at Fort Henderson with unusual severity that year. Temperatures dropped far below normal, and heavy snowfall created treacherous conditions across the mountainous terrain. The base's routine operations became increasingly challenging as soldiers had to adapt to extreme weather, conditions that tested both their equipment and their endurance. Sarah had been at the base for 8 months when she received news that would change the trajectory of her military career. She was selected to join an elite reconnaissance unit that specialized in gathering intelligence in hostile environments. The selection was based on her exceptional performance during training exercises, her demonstrated courage under pressure, and recommendations from her superiors who had observed her steady development as a soldier. The reconnaissance unit was led by Captain Maria Santos, a seasoned officer with extensive experience in special operations. Santos had initially been skeptical about accepting Sarah into the unit, not because of her gender, but because of her relatively limited field experience. However, after reviewing Sarah's training records and speaking with her previous commanders, Santos decided to give her an opportunity to prove herself in the specialized role. The unit consisted of 8 highly trained soldiers, each with specific expertise in areas such as communications, explosives, medical care, and survival techniques. Sarah was assigned as the team's primary scout, responsible for advanced reconnaissance and threat assessment. The role required exceptional observational skills, the ability to move silently through various terrains, and the capacity to make quick decisions under extreme stress. Sarah's first mission with the reconnaissance unit was scheduled for early February. The team was tasked with conducting a week-long surveillance operation in a remote mountain region, where intelligence reports suggested unusual activity that could pose a threat to national security. The mission would test every aspect of their training and require them to operate in some of the most challenging conditions imaginable. Commander Reynolds took a personal interest in the mission planning, as it represented the first time his base would be deploying soldiers for an active intelligence-gathering operation rather than training exercises. He spent hours reviewing the mission parameters with Captain Santos, ensuring that every detail had been considered and that the team had access to the best available equipment and support resources. Sarah prepared for the mission with characteristic thoroughness. She studied maps of the target area until she could navigate the terrain blindfolded, practiced with specialized equipment that would allow her to remain hidden while observing potential targets, and reviewed protocols for emergency situations that might arise during the operation. The night before deployment, Commander Reynolds addressed the reconnaissance team personally. He emphasized the importance of their mission and expressed confidence in their abilities. When he spoke to Sarah privately afterward, He acknowledged the significance of her selection for the unit and reminded her that she was representing not just herself, but all female soldiers who aspired to serve in combat roles. The team departed Fort Henderson before dawn on a Tuesday morning, traveling by helicopter to a landing zone approximately 20 miles from their target area. The weather was clear but bitterly cold, with temperatures hovering near 20 degrees below zero. Each team member carried specialized winter gear along with their standard equipment, creating heavy loads that would test their endurance throughout the mission. Sarah immediately distinguished herself during the approach to the target area. Her ability to read the terrain and identify potential hazards helped the team avoid several dangerous situations, including unstable snow formations that could have triggered avalanches and areas where thin ice might have caused them to fall through frozen streams. As the team's scout, Sarah was responsible for advancing ahead of the main group to identify safe routes and potential threats. This required her to operate alone for extended periods, relying solely on her training and instincts to navigate the treacherous mountain environment. Her teammates depended on her assessments to make critical decisions about their movement and positioning. On the third day of the mission, Sarah discovered evidence of the suspicious activity that had prompted their deployment. Hidden in a remote valley, she observed structures that appeared to be temporary shelters along with equipment that suggested ongoing operations by an unknown group. The discovery was significant because the area was supposed to be uninhabited and off-limits to civilian activities. Captain Santos ordered the team to establish a concealed observation post overlooking the valley, where they could monitor the suspicious activity while remaining undetected. Sarah was assigned to maintain continuous surveillance during daylight hours, documenting everything she observed and reporting any changes in the situation to the team leader. Over the next 2 days, Sarah's observations revealed a pattern of activity that suggested the unknown group was conducting operations that could pose a serious security threat. She documented the arrival and departure of individuals, the movement of equipment, and activities that appeared to be related to weapons or explosive materials. The intelligence Sarah gathered was transmitted back to Fort Henderson through encrypted communications, where it was analyzed by specialists who confirmed the significance of her discoveries. Commander Reynolds personally reviewed her reports and was impressed by the level of detail and accuracy she provided, despite the challenging conditions under which she was operating. As the mission neared its scheduled conclusion, Sarah noticed a change in the activity patterns in the valley below. The unknown group appeared to be preparing for a major operation, with increased personnel and equipment movements that suggested they were planning something significant. In the immediate future, Captain Santos made the decision to extend the mission for an additional 48 hours to gather more intelligence about the group's intentions. This decision would prove to be fateful, as it placed the reconnaissance team in position to witness events that would have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. The weather took a turn for the worse on the mission's 7th day, with heavy snowfall and high winds that reduced visibility to near zero. The team was forced to take shelter in their concealed position while the storm raged around them. Despite the harsh conditions, Sarah continued her surveillance duties, determined not to miss any important developments in the valley below. It was during this storm that Sarah observed something that made her blood run cold. Through her specialized optical equipment, she saw members of the unknown group preparing what appeared to be a sophisticated ambush designed to target military personnel. The scope and complexity of their preparations suggested they had advanced knowledge of military operations in the area. Sarah immediately reported her observations to Captain Santos, who realized the implications of what she had discovered. The unknown group was not just conducting suspicious activities. They were actively preparing to attack military forces. The intelligence suggested that Fort Henderson itself might be the target, making Sarah's discovery a matter of life and death for everyone at the base. The reconnaissance team faced a critical decision. They could complete their mission as planned and return to base with the intelligence they had gathered, or they could take action to prevent the planned attack. Captain Santos consulted with Commander Reynolds via encrypted communications, and together they developed a plan that would require split-second timing and exceptional courage from every member of the team. The storm continued to rage as Captain Santos finalized the emergency plan with Commander Reynolds. Intelligence analysis had confirmed Sarah's worst fears. The unknown group was planning a coordinated attack on Fort Henderson, scheduled for the following morning. The attack would coincide with a routine supply convoy that was expected to arrive at the base, providing the perfect cover for infiltration. Commander Reynolds faced an impossible decision. If he alerted the base and canceled the supply convoy, the attackers might realize their plans had been discovered and simply postpone their operation until a better opportunity arose. However, if the convoy proceeded as scheduled without adequate protection, the results could be catastrophic for both the convoy personnel and the base itself. The solution required unprecedented coordination between the reconnaissance team and base security forces. The team would remain in position to monitor the attackers' movements and provide real-time intelligence, while Sarah would undertake the most dangerous assignment of her military career, infiltrating the enemy position to gather critical information about their weapons and timing. Captain Santos initially opposed the plan, arguing that sending Sarah alone into the enemy camp was too risky. However, Sarah's proven abilities as a scout, combined with her small stature that would help her remain undetected, made her the logical choice for the mission. After heated discussion, Santos reluctantly agreed, but only with strict conditions about extraction procedures if the situation became too dangerous. Sarah spent the remaining hours of darkness preparing for what could be the most important mission of her life. She studied the terrain around the enemy position, memorized the locations of sentries and equipment, and developed multiple escape routes in case her presence was discovered. Her teammates helped her prepare specialized equipment that would allow her to move silently through the snow and communicate with the team without being detected. As dawn approached, Sarah began her descent into the valley. The storm had subsided, but heavy snow cover provided excellent camouflage for her movements. She carried minimal equipment to reduce noise and bulk, relying on her training and natural instincts. To navigate the treacherous approach to the enemy camp, the infiltration required 3 hours of painstaking movement through terrain that offered little natural cover. Sarah had to cross open areas where any mistake could expose her to enemy sentries, climb down steep rocky sections where falling stones could alert the entire camp, and navigate through areas where the snow was so deep that each step required enormous effort. When she finally reached a position where she could observe the enemy camp closely, Sarah was shocked by what she discovered. The unknown group was much larger and better equipped than intelligence reports had suggested. They possessed military-grade weapons, sophisticated communication equipment, and explosives that could cause massive damage to Fort Henderson's infrastructure. More alarming was the discovery that the group included individuals wearing military uniforms that appeared authentic. Sarah realized that the attackers had inside knowledge of base operations and security procedures, suggesting that they had infiltrated military personnel or had access to classified information that would make their attack much more effective. Through careful observation, Sarah documented the enemy's battle plan. They intended to use multiple attack vectors, hitting the base from 3 different directions while creating diversions that would confuse security forces and prevent an effective response. The supply convoy would be ambushed first, with survivors being used as hostages to complicate any military response. Sarah transmitted her findings to Captain Santos using encrypted burst communications that minimized the risk of detection. The intelligence she provided completely changed the base's defensive strategy, allowing Commander Reynolds to prepare countermeasures that would neutralize many of the attackers' advantages. However, as Sarah prepared to withdraw from her observation position, she overheard a conversation that changed everything. The enemy leaders were discussing a last-minute modification to their plan that would target Commander Reynolds personally. They had identified his daily routine and planned to assassinate him before launching their main attack, believing that eliminating the base commander would create chaos that would ensure their mission's success. This information created a new crisis. Commander Reynolds was scheduled to inspect security preparations at the main gate at exactly the time when the assassins would be in position. Sarah realized that she was the only person who could prevent the assassination, but doing so would require her to abandon her concealed position and take direct action against the enemy. The decision tormented Sarah as she weighed her options. Her training emphasized the importance of following orders and maintaining mission discipline, but her conscience would not allow her to stand by while her commander walked into a trap. She knew that intervening would almost certainly expose her presence and compromise the larger defensive operation. But she could not live with herself if she allowed Commander Reynolds to be killed when she had the power to prevent it. Sarah made her choice. She transmitted a final message to Captain Santos explaining her intentions, then began moving toward the position where the assassins were waiting. The approach required her to cross nearly 200 yards of open ground while remaining undetected by multiple enemy sentries who were positioned throughout the area. Using every technique she had learned during her scout training, Sarah moved through the snow like a ghost. She timed her movements to coincide with wind gusts that would mask any sound, used terrain features to break up her outline, and controlled her breathing to minimize vapor clouds that could reveal her position in the cold air. The assassins had positioned themselves in an abandoned building that overlooked the main gate area. Sarah could see their weapons and equipment through broken windows, and she realized that they had prepared multiple escape routes that would allow them to disappear into the wilderness after completing their mission. As Commander Reynolds' inspection time approached, Sarah found herself in an impossible position. She was close enough to the assassins to disrupt their attack, but any action she took would immediately expose her to deadly retaliation. She had no backup support, no heavy weapons, and no way to communicate with base security forces without alerting the enemy to her presence. Sarah's mind raced through possible solutions as she watched Commander Reynolds emerge from the base headquarters building and begin walking toward the main gate. The assassins were already taking aim through their rifle scopes, and she realized that she had perhaps 30 seconds to act before it would be too late to save her commander's life. In that moment, all of Sarah's training, experience, and natural instincts came together. She saw a solution that was incredibly dangerous but might work if she executed it perfectly. The plan required split-second timing, absolute precision, and a level of courage that would test everything she believed about herself as a soldier. Sarah took a deep breath, said a silent prayer, and prepared to take action that would either save Commander Reynolds' life or result in her own death. She knew that whatever happened in the next few minutes would define not just her own legacy, but the future of everyone at Fort Henderson. Commander Reynolds walked steadily toward the main gate, completely unaware of the deadly trap that awaited him. His routine morning inspection had become so predictable that the assassins had been able to time their attack with precision. Through her scope, Sarah could see the lead assassin's finger moving toward the trigger as he prepared to take the shot that would change everything. Sarah's plan was born from desperation and tactical thinking. She had noticed a fuel storage tank positioned between her location and the assassin's building. The tank contained heating oil for the abandoned structure, and if she could create an explosion at precisely the right moment, the blast would disrupt the assassin's aim while providing enough chaos for her to neutralize the immediate threat. With no time for second thoughts, Sarah pulled a small explosive charge from her equipment pack. The charge was designed for demolition work, but she calculated that it would be sufficient to rupture the fuel tank and create the diversion she needed. The risk was enormous. The explosion would alert every enemy in the valley to her presence, and she would have to move quickly to avoid being killed in the blast herself. Sarah armed the explosive device and began a silent countdown in her head. She needed to time the detonation perfectly. Too early and Commander Reynolds would still be in danger from the assassins. Too late, and the shot would already have been fired. Her hands remained steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system, as she prepared to execute the most critical action of her military career. At the precise moment when the lead assassin was about to fire, Sarah triggered the explosive charge. The blast was tremendous, sending flames and debris high into the air, while creating a thunderous noise that echoed throughout the valley. The assassins' building shook violently, throwing off their aim and sending them diving for cover as burning fuel rained down around their position. Commander Reynolds immediately recognized the sound of an explosion and dropped to the ground while activating his emergency communicator. His military instincts told him that the base was under attack, and he began coordinating defensive measures even before he fully understood what was happening. Sarah's diversion had worked perfectly, but now she faced an even greater challenge. The explosion had alerted every enemy combatant in the valley to her presence, and she could see armed figures moving toward her position from multiple directions. She had perhaps 2 minutes before they would reach her location, and she needed to use that time to complete her mission. Moving with incredible speed and precision, Sarah advanced on the assassins' building while they were still disoriented from the explosion. The structure was partially damaged by the blast, with broken windows and debris scattered throughout the interior. She could hear the assassins shouting to each other as they tried to reorganize and determine what had happened. Sarah entered the building through a rear window that had been blown out by the explosion. Her military training had prepared her for close-quarters combat, but she had never faced a situation where she was outnumbered 3-1 by experienced enemy fighters. She would need to use every advantage possible, including surprise, superior positioning, and her intimate knowledge of the building's layout that she had gained through careful observation. The first assassin she encountered was trying to re-establish his shooting position at a front window. Sarah approached from behind and used hand-to-hand combat techniques to neutralize him quickly and silently. She secured his weapon and communication equipment before moving deeper into the building to locate the remaining threats. The second assassin had taken cover behind an overturned table and was attempting to contact other enemy units through his radio. Sarah realized that if he succeeded in alerting the entire enemy force to her presence, she would face overwhelming odds that would make escape impossible. She made a split-second decision to engage him directly, using the element of surprise to overcome his advantageous position. The brief firefight was intense but decisive. Sarah's superior training and positioning allowed her to neutralize the second assassin, while sustaining only minor injuries herself. However, the noise of the engagement had definitely alerted the third assassin, who had taken a defensive position elsewhere in the building. Sarah found herself in a tactical standoff with the remaining enemy fighter. Both had taken cover positions that provided protection, but limited their ability to engage each other directly. She could hear him moving through the building, trying to flank her position while she attempted to locate him through sound and movement. The psychological pressure was immense. Sarah knew that enemy reinforcements were approaching her location, and every second that passed reduced her chances of successful escape. However, she also understood that the remaining assassin still posed a direct threat to Commander Reynolds and other base personnel if she failed to neutralize him completely. Using tactics learned during urban warfare training, Sarah created a diversion by throwing debris to simulate movement in one direction, while actually advancing from another angle. The technique worked perfectly, allowing her to locate and engage the final assassin before he could react to her real position. With the immediate threat neutralized, Sarah quickly searched the building for intelligence materials that might reveal additional details about the enemy's plans. She discovered communication equipment, maps of the base, and documents that confirmed her worst fears about the scope of the planned attack. The information would be crucial for the base's defensive preparations. However, Sarah's situation was becoming increasingly desperate. Through the broken windows, she could see enemy fighters surrounding the building and moving into assault positions. She estimated at least a dozen heavily armed combatants who were preparing to storm her position. Her ammunition was limited, her escape routes were compromised, and she had no direct communication with friendly forces. Sarah transmitted her final intelligence report to Captain Santos, providing complete details about the enemy's capabilities and plans. She included information about the assassins she had neutralized and recommended immediate defensive measures to protect Commander Reynolds and other key personnel at the base. Captain Santos received Sarah's transmission and immediately understood the gravity of her situation. The reconnaissance team was too far away to provide direct assistance, and base security forces could not reach her position in time to prevent her from being overwhelmed by enemy fighters. Santos faced the agonizing reality that Sarah had sacrificed herself to save the mission and protect her fellow soldiers. But Sarah was not ready to give up. Her military training had taught her that soldiers never surrender while they still have the ability to fight, and she was determined to make her final stand count for something meaningful. She used the remaining explosive charges in her equipment to create improvised defensive positions and prepared for what she knew would be the fight of her life. The enemy assault began just as Sarah completed her preparations. Multiple attackers advanced on the building from different directions, using suppressive fire and tactical movement to close the distance while minimizing their exposure to her defensive position. The battle was fierce and chaotic, with Sarah using every available advantage to hold off the overwhelming enemy force. As the firefight continued, Sarah could hear the sound of helicopters in the distance. She realized that her sacrifice had given Commander Reynolds and the base security forces enough time to organize a response to the enemy threat. Whatever happened to her, she had succeeded in preventing the assassination and providing the intelligence needed to defend Fort Henderson against the planned attack. The sound of approaching helicopters grew louder as Sarah continued her desperate defense of the building. She had been holding off the enemy assault for nearly 20 minutes, using tactical positioning and careful ammunition management to maximize her effectiveness against overwhelming odds. Her training had prepared her for extended combat situations, but she was beginning to feel the physical and mental strain of sustained engagement. Commander Reynolds had acted swiftly upon receiving intelligence about the planned attack. Within minutes of Sarah's first transmission, he had activated emergency protocols that placed the entire base on high alert. Security teams were deployed to critical positions. The supply convoy was diverted to a secure location, and assault helicopters were launched to provide immediate response capability. The helicopters approaching Sarah's position were part of a quick reaction force led by Captain Santos and the remaining members of the reconnaissance team. They had been monitoring Sarah's transmissions and understood that she was fighting for her life against superior numbers. The rescue mission was complicated by the need to distinguish between Sarah and enemy combatants in a chaotic combat environment. Sarah heard the distinctive sound of military helicopters and realized that help was finally arriving. However, she also understood that the enemy fighters surrounding her position would likely intensify their assault rather than retreat when faced with additional military forces. She prepared for what could be the most dangerous phase of the entire engagement. The first helicopter to arrive was an armed reconnaissance aircraft that immediately began engaging enemy positions around the building. The pilot used precision strikes to neutralize several enemy fighters while avoiding damage to the structure where Sarah was located. The accurate fire provided Sarah with a brief respite that allowed her to assess her situation and prepare for the next phase of the battle. Captain Santos arrived in the second helicopter, along with a special operations team equipped for close-quarters rescue missions. The team fast-roped into positions around the building and began a coordinated assault on the remaining enemy fighters. Their arrival changed the tactical situation dramatically, shifting the odds in favor of the rescue forces. Sarah coordinated her actions with the rescue team through hand signals and brief radio transmissions. Her intimate knowledge of the building's layout and the enemy positions proved invaluable in guiding the special operations soldiers to maximum effectiveness. Working together, they systematically cleared the area around the building and neutralized the remaining threats. The rescue operation was completed within 30 minutes of the helicopter's arrival. Sarah emerged from the building exhausted but uninjured, carrying intelligence materials and enemy equipment that would prove crucial for understanding the scope of the threat against Fort Henderson. Her actions had not only saved Commander Reynolds' life, but had also provided the information needed to prevent a major attack on the base. Commander Reynolds personally oversaw Sarah's debriefing, recognizing the extraordinary nature of her actions and their impact on base security. The intelligence she had gathered revealed that the enemy force was part of a larger terrorist organization that had been planning coordinated attacks on multiple military installations. Her intervention had disrupted these plans and potentially saved hundreds of lives. The immediate aftermath of the rescue focused on exploiting the intelligence Sarah had provided. Military analysts worked around the clock to identify other potential targets and track down remaining members of the terrorist organization. The information led to successful operations that prevented additional attacks and resulted in the capture of key terrorist leaders. Sarah's actions during the crisis earned recognition from the highest levels of military command. Her courage in infiltrating the enemy position, her tactical thinking in preventing the assassination, and her determination in holding off overwhelming odds until rescue arrived demonstrated exceptional leadership and military prowess that exceeded anything expected from a soldier of her rank and experience. The news of Sarah's heroic actions spread throughout the military community and beyond. Media reports described how a young female soldier had single-handedly prevented a terrorist attack and saved her commander's life through extraordinary courage and skill. The story resonated with people around the world who were inspired by her example of selfless service and determination. Military historians began studying Sarah's actions as an example of exceptional leadership under extreme pressure. Her decision-making process, Tactical innovations and ability to adapt to rapidly changing circumstances became subjects of analysis in military academies and training programs. The case study of her mission became required reading for soldiers studying advanced tactical operations. Sarah herself struggled with the sudden attention and recognition she received. She had acted according to her training and conscience, never expecting that her actions would be viewed as particularly extraordinary. The praise and media coverage made her uncomfortable, as she preferred to focus on her duties rather than personal recognition. However, military leadership recognized that Sarah's story had become larger than her individual actions. She represented the potential of all soldiers, regardless of gender or background, to rise to extraordinary challenges when circumstances demanded exceptional courage. Her example inspired other female soldiers and demonstrated the value of diversity in military operations. The investigation into the terrorist organization continued for several months, revealing the extent of their planning and capabilities. Sarah's intelligence had disrupted a network that posed a significant threat to national security, and her actions had far-reaching consequences beyond the immediate prevention of the attack on Fort Henderson. Commander Reynolds recommended Sarah for the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration for valor in combat. The recommendation detailed her extraordinary heroism in preventing his assassination, her tactical brilliance in gathering crucial intelligence, and her courage in fighting against overwhelming odds to protect her fellow soldiers. The Medal of Honor review process was thorough and demanding, requiring extensive documentation and testimony from multiple witnesses. Captain Santos, the members of the rescue team, and intelligence analysts all provided detailed accounts of Sarah's actions and their impact on military operations. The evidence overwhelmingly supported the recommendation for the nation's highest military honor. Sarah's promotion to sergeant came through while the Medal of Honor recommendation was under review. The promotion recognized her, demonstrated leadership abilities and her potential for greater responsibilities within the military structure. She was assigned to advanced training programs that would prepare her for leadership roles in special operations units. The changes in Sarah's life were dramatic and sometimes overwhelming. She found herself serving as a role model for other female soldiers, while continuing to perform her regular military duties. Speaking engagements, interviews, and ceremonial functions became part of her routine, though she always insisted that her primary focus remained on being an effective soldier. Military recruitment efforts began featuring Sarah's story as an example of the opportunities available to all qualified candidates regardless of gender. Her example helped encourage more women to consider military careers and demonstrated that exceptional performance would be recognized and rewarded appropriately. The terrorist organization that had planned the attack on Fort Henderson was eventually dismantled through operations that built upon the intelligence Sarah had provided. The success of these operations validated the significance of her actions and demonstrated how individual courage could have strategic implications for national security. The White House ceremony took place on a crisp autumn morning, 18 months after Sarah's heroic actions at Fort Henderson. She stood at attention in her dress uniform as the President of the United States prepared to award her the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration for valor in combat. The East Room was filled with military leaders, government officials, and members of Sarah's family who had traveled from across the country to witness this historic moment. Sarah's journey to this moment had been remarkable. The shy young woman who had once doubted her place in the military had become a symbol of courage and determination for soldiers around the world. Her story had been featured in books, documentaries, and training materials that would inspire future generations of military personnel. Commander Reynolds had the honor of reading the citation that detailed Sarah's extraordinary actions. His voice carried deep emotion as he described how she had infiltrated an enemy position, prevented his assassination, and fought against overwhelming odds to protect her fellow soldiers. The words seemed inadequate to capture the full scope of her courage and its impact on military operations. As the President placed the Medal of Honor around Sarah's neck, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. She remembered the doubts and challenges she had faced during basic training, the skepticism of fellow soldiers who questioned her abilities, and the moment when she had made the decision to risk her own life to save her commander. The ceremony was broadcast live around the world, reaching millions of viewers who were inspired by Sarah's example. Military bases throughout the globe stopped their normal operations to watch as their fellow soldier received the nation's highest honor. In many cases, the ceremony provided an opportunity for military leaders to discuss the importance of courage, sacrifice, and leadership with their personnel. Sarah's family watched with pride and amazement as their daughter received the highest honor their nation could bestow. Her mother, who had once worried about her decision to join the military, now understood that Sarah had found her true calling. Her father, who had initially questioned whether she had the strength for military service, beamed with pride as he watched his daughter being recognized for extraordinary courage. The impact of Sarah's recognition extended far beyond the ceremony itself. Military recruitment centers across the country reported significant increases in applications from women who had been inspired by her story. Her example demonstrated that exceptional performance and courage would be recognized regardless of gender, helping to break down barriers that had previously discouraged qualified candidates from pursuing military careers. Sarah's former teammates from Fort Henderson were invited to attend the ceremony, and many of them had followed her example by pursuing advanced training and leadership positions within their units. The soldier she had rescued from the river during that early training exercise was now a sergeant himself, and he credited Sarah's example with inspiring him to become a better leader and soldier. Captain Santos, who had led the reconnaissance mission, was promoted to major and assigned to develop new training programs based on lessons learned from Sarah's actions. The programs emphasized adaptive thinking, individual initiative, and the importance of mission success over personal safety. Sarah's tactical innovations during the crisis became standard elements of advanced combat training. Commander Reynolds had been promoted to colonel and assigned to a prestigious position at the Pentagon, where he continued to advocate for policies that would maximize the potential of all military personnel. He frequently cited Sarah's example when discussing the importance of evaluating soldiers based on their capabilities rather than preconceived notions about their limitations. The Medal of Honor ceremony marked the beginning of a new phase in Sarah's military career. She was assigned to the Special Operations Command, where her experience and proven leadership abilities made her an ideal candidate for the most challenging missions. Her story had become legend within the Special Operations community, and she was welcomed as a proven warrior who had demonstrated exceptional courage under fire. Sarah's new assignment involved training other soldiers in advanced reconnaissance and intelligence gathering techniques. She drew upon her experiences at Fort Henderson to develop realistic training scenarios that prepared soldiers for the psychological and physical challenges they might face in actual combat situations. Her teaching methods emphasized the importance of preparation, adaptability, and unwavering commitment to mission success. The terrorist organization that had planned the attack on Fort Henderson was completely dismantled within 2 years of Sarah's intervention. International cooperation led to arrests of key leaders in multiple countries, and intelligence gathered from the operation prevented dozens of planned attacks on military and civilian targets. Sarah's actions had initiated a chain of events that significantly enhanced global security. Military academies around the world began including Sarah's story in their curricula as an example of exceptional leadership and tactical thinking. Her decision-making process during the crisis was analyzed and taught to future officers who would face similar challenges in their careers. The case study became a classic example of how individual courage and initiative could have strategic implications. Sarah herself remained focused on her duties rather than her fame. She continued to push herself to higher standards of performance and sought out the most challenging assignments available to her. Her goal was not personal recognition, but rather the opportunity to serve her country and protect her fellow soldiers in whatever capacity would be most effective. The changes in military culture that resulted from Sarah's example were gradual but significant. More women began pursuing combat roles, and military leaders became more open to recognizing and developing talent regardless of traditional barriers. Sarah's success had demonstrated that the military's effectiveness could be enhanced by maximizing the potential of all qualified personnel. 5 years after the Medal of Honor ceremony, Sarah was promoted to captain and assigned to lead her own special operations unit. The assignment represented the culmination of her military career and provided her with the opportunity to apply everything she had learned about leadership, courage, and tactical excellence. Her unit quickly developed a reputation for successfully completing the most difficult missions. Sarah's story continued to inspire people around the world who faced their own challenges and obstacles. Her example demonstrated that ordinary people could achieve extraordinary things when they combined preparation, courage, and unwavering commitment to their principles. Letters from young people who had been inspired by her story arrived regularly, and she made time to respond personally whenever possible. The legacy of Sarah's actions extended beyond her individual achievements to influence military doctrine and training procedures that would benefit countless future soldiers. Her example proved that innovation and courage could emerge from unexpected sources and that the military's strength came from the collective potential of all its members. As Sarah looked back on her journey from an uncertain recruit to a decorated war hero, she understood that her story was really about the power of perseverance and the importance of standing up for what was right regardless of personal cost. Her actions had saved lives, prevented terrorist attacks, and inspired a new generation of soldiers who would carry forward the values of courage, sacrifice, and service to others. The Medal of Honor around her neck served as a constant reminder of the moment when she had chosen to risk everything to save her commander and protect her fellow soldiers. It represented not just her individual courage, but the potential that existed within every soldier who was willing to put service before self and courage before comfort. Sarah's legend in military records was secure, but her real legacy lived on in the soldiers she had trained, the lives she had saved, and the example she had set for future generations who would face their own moments of crisis and choice. Her story proved that heroes were not born, but made through preparation, courage, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right when the moment demanded everything they had to give.